I'm sure this is the time everybody is a little tired and you're getting ready for lunch. But I must tell you the truth that I was under the impression that when we started this association, you could come with ideas to explore and not fully formed ideas. And what I beg of you is that I need your help here. I started with a very simple notion. And the notion I started with was just to explore the way African thinkers are taught in school. That was all I wanted. Just to see, in what areas do you teach this? And this is what led me to the topic, studying Chinua Achebe in American schools, a means to an end or an end in itself. So, if the name Chinua Achebe stands as a metaphor for non-Western author, should his corpus of work remain as a representation of socio-cultural struggles of peoples whom at a historical moment were at the margins of global attention? There are different schools of thought on how to integrate non-Western authors into curriculum or even brought to the attention of learners in American schools. The idea of using Achebe as the arrowhead of our attention does not toe the line of a single story or perspective. It gives us room to interrogate the ongoing humanization project of Africans in American schools. To buttress this, Eve Eisenberg in 2013, I think she was a student at the University of Georgia, Athens, but she's since graduated, cautions that, and I quote, even if Things Fall Apart performs the role its author imagined for it, that of reclaiming the dignity and beauty of the Igbo life world from the racism of colonial discourses, no one text should ever flash out a truly nuanced image of Nigeria, much less of Africa, end of quote. So let's have a brief history of African literature and the American university. Richard Preby in 1974 states that, and I quote, "Number of colleges and universities offering courses in African literature has steadily increased over the past 5 or 6 years, a period when we have witnessed cutbacks in many academic areas. As at 1972, there were over 80 colleges and universities where African literature was taught in the United States, while before 1968, there were only a handful of places that offered any courses at all. For the first time, a large number of graduates are currently engaged in studying African writers." End of quote. The statistics for 2018 is unavailable to this presenter, but we should assume that the discipline is not in decline. At a point in time, the perception, subjective as it is, that, and I quote, "racialism and departmental conservatism continually work towards making it difficult to teach African literature, even obfuscating the fact that the study of this literature has academic integrity." End of quote. Based on his 44-year-old observation, it will be in perfect order to find out what the present politics of African literature is in many American universities today. The latest I have in print is Christopher Miller's 1993, a chapter in Africa and the Disciplines, edited by Bates, Madumbe, and Oberg. We are reminded of Dean Donald's Kagan's speech when he said, "The study," and I quote, "the study of Western civilization in our schools is under heavy attack," end of quote. The state of African literature from a personal account. Dr. Ogode, I got in touch with him because I didn't have any empirical data to work with. And I know he's written a book on how to teach approaches to teaching Achebe in schools. So I sent him an email and he responded, and I'm just going to say it all as he sent it to me. According to him, and I quote, "There's next to no investment in the field by Africans themselves over here," meaning in America. "Rich Africans at home and abroad have established no African-centered institution of higher education in America to rival, for example, Jewish-affiliated colleges and universities that are privately owned. Arabs and other groups are also promoting their own cultures in America. So, can Africans blame others for not promoting their cultures when even they themselves won't? In the few places where African studies as a field is recognized within the current disciplinary configurations in the American educational establishment, we're talking about a field that's shy of expansion. Africa-related funding for many hires and for research may be nearly non-existent. In many instances, before a vacancy opens up, the person currently occupying the position has literally to give it up either through retirement or death," end of quote. But he ends on a questioning note, which I would like to read as well. "General interest in Africa is minimal because of negative stereotypes. The conduct of African leaders and politicians has done little to help in elevating. Might it not be wishful thinking to expect expansion of African studies as a field to occur in America without consummate growth in Africa's cultural, economic, historical, and geopolitical importance? Whatever response we may individually have for Dr. Ogede's posers or questions, the words of Christopher Miller in 1993 again must be allowed to resonate and mediate our responses. And he says, and I quote, "The study of Africa has a vital role to play in the broadening of our students' intellectual horizons. Studying Africa will make them aware of how those horizons came to exist and what they mean," end of quote. University of Pittsburgh's African Studies website throws more light, and I would like to share what is on that website with you. It says, "The relevance of African issues is apparent in our everyday lives. We use African products, exports, or mineral resources, sometimes unknowingly. The Coltrane in our cell phones is only one example. Studying African history and current events," and I put that in red, "gives us a deeper understanding of world history and even modern American history. For instance, the relationship between the United States and Africa predates American independence. The profits of the transatlantic slave trade helped jumpstart our industrial revolution, while the labor of enslaved Africans and their descendants laid the economic foundations of this nation. Right now, African immigrants are establishing more and more communities in America, thus enriching our own African culture, which puts the study of African issues and cultures at our front doorstep. African studies are important to students who want to understand their neighbors and themselves." And then this emphasis is mine as well. "You become a better informed global citizen when you study Africa," end of quote. So having given you such a long introduction, let me quickly do what scholars do, give you a roadmap to what you probably already have suspected. These questions raised will not be allowed to detain my presentation, but shall advance to lay out the roadmap of issues within the interest of this presentation. This presentation marks the larger question of why the study of, in parentheses, world literature is essential in schools when the world is filled with more pressing issues. The answer to why studying literature has received enough attention and it would be a waste of time to add any other layer of thought to it. I will therefore focus on critical appraisal of means and methods already devised for the study of Achebe in American schools, a brief review of materials online and elsewhere. So what are the questions? At this historical point in America, when Karen Smith in 2011 concludes that, I quote, "We operate under the premise that no world unity exists or can exist, even as we desire to expand the number of bridges we make to other cultures through the problematic of translation," end of quote. The subject matter of our interest may be narrowed simply to two interrelated questions. Why study books written by Chinua Achebe in American schools? To what end will studying a non-Western writer or author be for the cognitive development of American students? There is, of course, preceding literature review. People have done things in this area. So before attempting any response to the issues, a brief literature review helps put the study of non-Western writers into proper perspective. Brandeis University has a set of courses it terms non-Western and comparison courses. One of the outcomes as stated by this website is that, in quote, non-Western courses expand students' horizons and help them better understand their own history and culture. The implication of this could be that non-Western courses become the other and a reference point by which American students can seek differences or similarities. It then becomes a way of building bridges or understanding to other cultures. Vicky Galloway, however, warns that bridges of culture facts produce only fiction, not the real culture, but a hybrid, wrapped in reference to our own, not its internal sense, but the sense we have given it, not its internal dynamics, but only the blips it displays on our own culture's radar screen, end of quote. In addition, Vicky suggests that teachers should guide learners, I quote, not only to enter the other culture on its own terms, but also to re-enter their own. And I think that's end of quote. I think that's a very important thing. It's not just learning about Africa, but what have you learned from Africa that you can take back to your own culture is a very essential part that I think. The real issue is not how to gain entry into other cultures that are different to theirs on that culture's own terms without preconceived notions of what the culture should be. In Bernard's words, when difference is treated as absolute, the fetishized other becomes exotic and unknowable and could never be like us. A logic that, however, inadvertently reinscribes colonialist stereotypes and paternalistically masks critical, political, and moral relativism as respect of difference, end of quote. And then I go on to talk about the classification of classrooms. Tanuri Ojaide prefers to classify some writers as post-independence writers, whereas somebody else would look at them as post-colonial. And I think there is something to be said for this. How Achebe is read in schools. Is it then possible to read any of Achebe's novels in English classes or in social studies classes? The simplicity of the text makes it a candidate for English classes. However, Eve Essenberg, as I told you before, points attention to an integrative unit, which is a derivative of a typical English social studies interdisciplinary unit. So, quickly you can see in the places where Achebe is studied. Achebe as part of Introduction to Sociology and Literature and Sociology, there are some things you can see. Even in geography, introductory geography, there are people who make a point that Achebe's work talks about space and gives students a vivid description of space. Use of fiction in geography classrooms Things Fall Apart as part of political geography, Things Fall Apart as a source of history, African novels as history, or African novels historical engagement, the novel as history, use of historical methods in Achebe's works. There are three concepts of history that is applicable to Things Fall Apart that I have looked at. The one that I find interesting is also Achebe in law and colonial cultures. And if anybody is interested, you can look at the book of Lauren Baton. She looks at cultures, legal regimes, and world history. And then the question of tragedy. Finally, the journey so far leads us to respond to two questions, and you know them. Could Achebe be an end unto himself, or the study of Achebe as a means to an end? Thank you very much for listening.